A very good afternoon and thank you so much for having taken the time to have joined us in today's webinar. My name is Jay and I am with the Identity and Access Management team here at ManageEngine. So it's always a wonderful sight to see you guys coming over to our presentations. This is a part of the global webinar series that we've been organizing since the beginning of this year. This is the 23rd webinar in this specific series, and today's topic is a very critical topic at a very critical point in time. We are going to be talking about Office 365 and one important aspect of Office 365, which is identity management in Office 365, where we go on to talk about challenges that administrators face when it comes to provisioning users, managing those Office 365 users, and in fact quite a lot of other stuff around user lifecycle management. We'll be taking a look at all of those. So before we get started, thank you guys once again, and you early birds are going to help me out sort the audio video check. All right, a quick audio video check before we proceed any further, just to ensure everybody is able to hear me and as well see my screen. A quick audio video check, guys. If you can hear me, use the chat to say great. We are getting started with today's webinar. I'm pretty sure you guys have grabbed a cup of coffee and you also have a notepad, because we have an interesting session ahead. The next 30-35 minutes we're going to be talking about streamlining Office 365 user lifecycle. So I would want to ensure that you're able to hear my audio loud and clear and you can see my screen. A quick audio video check. It will be really helpful if you can just type a great on the chat right now. Oh, lovely. Thank you so much, Nikolai. Thank you so much, Steve, Andrew, Jacob, for the confirmation. Wonderful. So the audio seems to be working fine and the video, I guess, as well is working fine. So today's topic again is around Office 365. I was telling you that it's a very critical time when it comes to Office 365 lifecycle management. Why is that? So in ManageEngine, we've been working with quite a lot of enterprises around the world, and we've come to this one conclusion. The adoption of Office 365 has become quite inevitable. There are only two options available. Either an organization goes the hybrid way or the cloud only way. But from the trend that we've observed, not many organizations are comfortable with going the complete cloud way or completely taking their identity and access management to cloud. So most of them are in the hybrid spectrum. Half of their identities are still in Active Directory and the rest of it are probably a copy of all those identities are available in Office 365. When it comes to you guys who are joining me today, I'm also very sure you guys should be like absolutely trained and great experts in Active Directory and managing identities in Active Directory. That's for a very long time been run right and straightforward. Not many complications to identity management in Active Directory. As a matter of fact, it is on-premise and you are under absolute control. You know what's what, you know who gets what, and it's quite straightforward. But then when it comes to Office 365, there are certain innate challenges, because one, it's a mobile environment where the mobility or the accessibility is the focus. So the number of touch points or the applications that the users use also is great, also is larger when compared to Active Directory. That being the case, at every juncture, isn't it very important that you have security in mind? Because when you're trying to work with usability, there's always this challenge. How do you strike the balance between usability and security? So that again brings us to today's webinar, where we'll be talking about simplifying user lifecycle management and mitigating all those challenges that come with manual maintenance of Office 365. So the first part of the session, I would want you to understand as to what would be the major challenges that an admin managing Office 365 would be facing. The first one is obviously being able to onboard users efficiently. So when we're talking about onboarding Office 365 users, unlike Active Directory, it's not straightforward. There are a couple of things that you'll have to have in mind. You create identities, you then go on to assign maybe a specific set of groups. You say who is the manager of the user, and then you go on assigning application licenses to that user. So when we are talking about one or two users, it's fine. you can do it manually, and I'm sure you will do it without any errors. But what about cases where we've got probably, let's say, 50 users? That's how it is, right? The HR sends you an email asking you to onboard users on multiple target systems. At no given point in time is it going to be just Office 365. So when we are thinking and talking about a platform or a future where we want identities to be provisioned across target systems, isn't it logical to have all of that done in one single go? Simultaneously provision users across all those target systems, and at the same time be in a position to also get the provisioning along with license management done right. So that's the most important challenge that administrators face. And when we're talking about bulk user onboarding, obviously when you do it manually, there are chances that there might be a mistake or two. You might become a victim of oversight, and nobody can blame you. Come on now. Office 365 license management isn't child's play. There are multiple applications in every single license, and it is absolutely important that the right privileges are also given to those users. So when it comes to doing all of this with the stock options that are available with the native tools or the native dashboards, it hasn't been really helpful for a lot of administrators. And probably you might be one of those users like me who loves PowerShell. I am a big PowerShell fan, no doubt. But then again, when it comes to PowerShell as well, there are quite a few challenges in getting the job done and knowing what exactly is the result of the PowerShell operation that you've done. So we would ideally require a system that can get all of this done under one single dashboard, a unified console that tells me who are the users being onboarded, which departments are they being onboarded to, and if it can automatically get this whole challenge solved for me, that's all the more better. So that's the first aspect of the session that we'll be talking about: onboarding users automatically in bulk, and also ensuring that the right properties, licenses and accesses are associated with that user being onboarded. The next challenge is going to be managing the user. So the next phase of the life cycle is, as the user goes through the organization over years, they are going to get more accesses, more applications, and yes, it is given that the number of churns or the number of changes that happens in an organization, be it Active Directory or Office 365 on a day-to-day basis, is phenomenal. Every single small change needs to be recorded, needs to be registered, needs to be checked, approved, and all of that being said, there is also going to be a requirement to be coordinating with multiple departments. It could be the HR department, it could be the concerned department for which the resource is being moved to. Quite a lot of challenges when it comes to managing the users as well and their licenses. We'll be talking about that. And yes, the last bit of user lifecycle management is going to be to effectively or securely offboard those users who no longer need to be a part of our system. So who are these users that we're talking about? So the biggest challenge, again, as per all our statistics and surveys we've understood, is essentially those inactive user accounts, or those dormant user accounts that end up either occupying unnecessary licenses or end up being a security threat for your organization. So we will need to have a strong, refined, fine-grained offboarding process that is automatic and that does not require an administrator to step in every single day, every single time when someone needs to be offboarded. So again, like I was telling you, if there are inactive accounts, I'm pretty sure most of you who are joining today do have inactive accounts in your Office 365 environment, and I'm sure now you're smiling. I'm pretty sure you've got inactive accounts in your environment now. But why is this a big problem? The major reason is, if it were Active Directory, inactive accounts, you'd quarantine them, you'd do this or that and somehow manage. But when it comes to Office 365, and when you're in the process of migrating to Office 365 in one go, most of us try to rely or take the help of a third-party vendor. Alright, when that happens, there have been instances where a lot of security checkboxes have not been checked, There have been a lot of complaints in the recent past of certain critical vulnerabilities being exposed because of the migration that was not done right. Privilege escalations, to be precise. Inactive accounts, the second one. So in fact, a while back we had done a couple of articles, and we had done a couple of ebooks, white papers and webinars around the best practices that the Homeland Security Department from the United States had given a while back. The Department of Homeland Security, their cyber security division, had gone to make an announcement with the recommendations for an Office 365 migration. So now come on, why would Homeland Security have to step in, and why would the CISA or the intelligence agency and security agency need to step in for Office 365 migration? It seems flabbergasting. So when I'm talking about Office 365 migration, there are chances that something could fundamentally go wrong, because you do it in bulk, you do it manually, you take in help of a tool, you have a vendor doing it for you, multiple cases. Or you could be this sort of organization that does provisioning users for the first time in Office 365. So the challenges are innumerable right here. So we would want to ensure that at any given point in time, we prevent and streamline both the onboarding and the offboarding likewise. That is the agenda of the session. And going forward, we'll also want to know, how do we handle resources in Office 365 and allocate them as per the requirement? How do we do it on a need-only basis? How do we ensure that they get temporary access? And yes, the tasks that you do day in, day out, the repetitive tasks, the monotonous ones that take up most of your time. One such example would be password resets for users. Now come on, you would receive tons and tons of calls for password resets. Earlier it was just Active Directory, but now you've got Active Directory, Office 365 and quite a lot of other applications as well for which you need to manage passwords and identities. So it is obvious that your users are going to come back and tell you that they've forgotten their passwords. So we will need provisions to streamline these challenges that are innate to Office 365 management when you're trying to do it with the stock options that are available. So going forward, I'm going to discuss certain downsides that an organization essentially ends up facing. The first and foremost being security risks. So when users get onboarded, it is important that they get the privileges only to those required groups. At times, when you're managing Office 365, you know how it works. The granularity that is available with Office 365 is not that very great. So there are chances that you might end up granting someone access privilege over a group or a resource. You would want to check that again. Dormant Office 365 accounts is a challenge we've been discussing all along. Workflow inefficiencies is also a major challenge. How do you get your users, your administrators, different stakeholders, all of them to work in tandem, but rather not through an email or probably a help desk system? How do you get all of them on board under a single platform and ensure that there is a linear flow of information or requests from one user to another? There's approval, there's review, and all of that happening one after the other. How do you ensure that? So we'll be talking about that as well, and the tool that's essentially going to help us through our process is the Office 365 module of AD 360. I'm pretty sure the guys who are attending the webinar are the ones who've been invited, specifically the ones who've already been with us for an Office 365 Manager Plus webinar or downloaded one of our resources. So you guys are an exclusive set of crowd for who we wanted to demo how simple Office 365 administration could be with this module. So we'll start by understanding scheduling certain automations, and then we'll see how simple it is to create these flowcharts or logics that determine what happens after what. And obviously, yes, there is support for importing data from multiple target systems. It could be a HRMS tool, it could be an existing database, it could be a database like an Oracle or an MS SQL database where your users already reside. You're creating users for the first time in Office 365 and you want to do it right. That can very well happen. And not to forget the administration activities that need to be audited. We'll be talking about that as well, and all of this automated, and that is very much the agenda. So how do we go forward using the O365 module? So we will need to have a system that efficiently onboards user, one that also automatically offboards, ensures that the principle of least privilege, which is not trusting any user, giving them just enough access and just in time access. These are the things that we'll be covering. The agenda is straightforward. We've discussed the challenges so far with respect to onboarding, offboarding, those dormant accounts, repetitive tasks, and all of that. Now our intention is to go forward and ensure that we set an automation and configure automation policies through Office 365 Manager Plus and get going. So jumping straight to the solution, we're talking about a solution that can get your onboarding streamlined. There are certain basic ingredients that are required to get this done right. So the policy that you see right here is essentially the logic that drives the automation. So I'm talking about onboarding users to the marketing department. As an administrator, I am very well aware that users belonging to different departments require different entitlements. A user belonging to the marketing department may not necessarily need the same set of licenses as that of one belonging to the sales department or the HR department per se. So here we are getting granular, helping the system understand what is the context and having certain set of conditions at every juncture to validate whether it's going as per our recommended flow or should we take an alternate course of action. So when a request pops in from the HR through an email with an attached CSV or from a help desk system, the system can pick up what is the case, what is the requirement, or to which department is the user being onboarded, and go on to effectively provision the user account, not just in Office 365 but in other platforms as well, and get the right attributes set. So I can set conditions right here saying onboard user, set manager, set mail properties to be so, add user to specific groups, add a multi-factor authentication to that specific user. You can go on, the permutations and combinations are endless. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly get the tool up for you to show you how it works in reality. So we are talking about AD360, a cumulative tool that does identity access management both for cloud and on-premise systems. So here the first aspect of this tool is being able to create templates. So templates are essentially going to help you determine and say who needs to get what. So here I can go on and create as many number of templates as possible for sales, for IT, depending upon roles, depending upon departments. The conditions can be to my convenience. So here, let me quickly give you an example of a marketing template. So I would want users being provisioned to my Office 365 and Active Directory to have set of attributes that are pre-specified if they are members of marketing department. One such attribute could probably be the OU in Active Directory or container in Office 365, and then when it comes to account, I would have the provision to be able to say which groups should the user be a part of. So since this user is a part of marketing, then the user needs relevant groups. You could specify all of that needs to be given. So a couple of basic groups that the user needs. Just for example, I'm pointing out to these groups. These aren't really accurate, but just for an example. So for marketing, these are the groups to which the user has to be member of. And then let me come to contact and specify who should be the manager for that specific user. That's another interesting case. So even before the user actually comes on board, I have intelligent rules and logics and context aware system that determines who gets what. So I select company, I select the department to which they need to be put into, let's say marketing, and then the job title as well, that is proportional. So the user is getting onboarded as a marketing manager, with Bharat being the manager for that user. So all of this can be predetermined if you have a template in place. And likewise, when it comes to Office 365, you could very much say, how do you want the accounts to be provisioned? Do you want directory sync enabled? Which are the Office 365 groups you want the user belonging to the marketing department to have access to? What are the licenses that need to be assigned? Which specific applications do you think that your marketing department users need? And then a couple of other options as well. So this is the fundamental logic or the ingredient that drives the automation, and I can still get granular. There are more permutations and combinations possible where I can say if it meets a specific condition. Since we are taking inputs from a HRMS tool, I am bound to have a lot of inputs and variables that I can pick and use to my advantage. One such variable could probably be, let's say, a job title, all right? So the user still gets onboarded to the marketing department, but then even under the marketing department, there are going to be different users and different levels of jobs and different job titles. There could be a marketing manager, there could be a marketing executive, there could be a field marketing staff, you never know. So you would get the provision to get really granular and say which specific title needs what specific accesses. So that is the beauty of the solution, where it lets you get really granular. So I'm going to be able to say which specific action needs to be given, which specific license needs to be given, and I can go on adding more rules for that one specific case. So likewise, after I've got my templates in place, I can configure as many number of automations I want, or whichever suits my requirement. I can configure an automation policy to onboard users across platforms. I do it through the AD Manager module, where I can say create a new automation policy. The instantaneous task is to create the user. I would want to use a specific template, let's say the sales department template, and then add successive tasks, whatever I want to happen after the user's onboarded. So you could have a custom script run. You could tell the system that the user is onboarded now, so please send out an email to respective users saying that the users into the system, the manager can be notified, the user himself or herself can be notified, the IT administrator can be notified. So these are a few cases for onboarding. Likewise, when we are talking about doing the same thing exclusively for Office 365, not just not in hybrid infrastructure, but an exclusive Office 365 module, that as well is very much feasible. So we are here. A quick second, let me give you access to the demo as I speak. So it's going to be demo.office365 or o365managerplus.com. I'm dropping a link to you on the chat right now, in your chat in 3 to 1. So you could click on this link and it will give you access to the demo setup that we've hosted online. So I have a couple of Office 365 automations configured in my tool. I'm going to quickly open up those automations and show you how intuitive the automation builder is. It lets you drag and drop certain policies. It lets you add filters, conditions, check true or false, get approval. All of that is going to be possible with the tool that I'm talking about. So this is the demo site that I'm talking about. So you log in as the administrator, and then you would be able to go through individual modules in the tool and check what works best for you. Just a quick second while the tool loads. So we are talking about having an automation that looks somewhat similar to this. So I'm talking about being able to create a new automation to onboard users, set manager, modify mail attributes. In fact, let's say you have a condition for a multi-factor authentication to be set for a specific set of users. Those users could belong to the administrator group. So you would want them to have an extra layer of security, which can very much happen if you have the O365 Manager Plus. So here you go. I have a couple of automation policies configured right here and tasks that are also configured right here. So these tasks are fundamentally going to help me onboard my users or modify my users, and it can be configured whichever way I see fit. So I'm going to quickly get into one of those tasks and show you what's the logic that powers the task. So here you go. So I have my system to effectively run every single day, probably at the beginning of the day, to import values from the HRMS tool. The HRMS tool sends out a CSV file on a regular basis, and it has details pertaining to the new users. My onboarding module will be able to import those users, and based on the logic that I've set earlier, it will grant the respective users respective privileges. So users from the marketing department will not by any chance have access to any groups on sales, which is the biggest problem, right? When you're doing it manually, a chance of a wrong group assignment is very much possible. So likewise, I can create multiple automation policies. Let me say onboarding, okay, and I call it test. All right, I'm saying click here, start off with the tasks that I want to proceed. So I'm saying user creation. So if I were to do an exclusive automation just for Office 365, I could head to this module and say user creation with licenses, and then select the license module that I have and then start off doing it. So I would be able to very much say which license needs to be assigned, what's the location, and go forward. So in my test instance, I don't seem to have an active license. So I'm going to quickly get to my demo instance once more and go forward. Just a quick second. So what we are trying to do right here is to build an automation for provisioning users with licenses. You could very much do that here. Once your license configuration is done right, you'd be able to fetch the right licenses for the user and go forward doing it. Yes, I've got it. I seem to have got it. So I can say edit license here and then choose the list of licenses that need to be applied, or the list of applications that need to be given to a specific user, right? I'm going to say okay. So the first aspect of it is done. Then select the country. Let's say India. Perfect. And then say save. Okay, so I've successfully got my first step done. I can go on, add a task or a condition or a timer. So when I add a timer, it gives me chronology, or it gives me performing successive action. So that is going to be possible. So if I want to make an edit, I can always do an edit. Yes, I want to delete it. I would want to do a successive task. I'm saying add another task. The task here is to assign group membership to the users. So I'm going to quickly say group. Here you go. Distribution group. I'd put them in a few distribution groups, and then I'd put them in a few security groups. I could very much do that. Just a quick second. Let's see if I have a security group that I can point to. And then I go on selecting the security groups for which I would need my users to have access to. There are certain groups. So since it's marketing that I'm talking about, I'd want them to have access only to those marketing related groups. And then there's one common permissions group. Every user in the organization gets access to that when they onboard. Since this is marketing, I'm just going to stick to marketing alone and then say okay. Right, and then save this specific task as well. So we have a series of tasks happening one after the other, and then let's say if all of this works out well and fine, I'm going to say condition as success. The task that needs to be performed is the assignment of manager. Right when the user is put into the group, right when the user gets the respective license that needs to be assigned, the next one that I want to do is look up for the manager who needs to be assigned to this specific user. So very simple, straightforward. I'm just walking you through one possibility. There are hundreds of possibilities. You could choose to customize from the list of available actions, whichever order works best for you, and based on whichever attribute you select, you're going to get a dynamic list of actions to perform. So I've selected this specific user as manager. I'm going ahead, saving it, and then yes, I would also want to ensure that since the user is a member of marketing department, I'm pretty sure the user is going to be on the go, on the move, using applications from using or accessing my system from a public Wi-Fi. That is a possibility, and marketing users of all users are the ones that could probably compromise the security by one small mishap or being careless. So I would ensure that they have a second factor of authentication or a multi-factor authentication that's sent to them every time when they log on through OTP. I've kept it simple for them. I'm enforcing this policy on them, and I'm saving that as well. So right at the time of provisioning, I'm doing probably 5 to 6 different tasks that would usually happen over a course of time. that are done instantaneously here. It's saving me quite a lot of time, and the best part is it's not just for one user, but how many ever users you want can be onboarded at the same time into different departments, and all attributes and all conditions set the exact same way you want it to. So what could probably take you an entire day, let's say, to onboard 100 users across different platforms and different departments, it could happen in less than 5 minutes. All of that is sorted right there for you. So that is the effective way of doing user onboarding. I'm going to quickly get back to my presentation deck and show you what more is there. So we've been talking about effective onboarding. The next obvious step is, as they go through the life cycle, they would need access to certain groups. They would need access or for a limited period of time, and only to those groups that they actually are entitled to. So that can be ensured with two aspects. One, with an automation that checks if the right users have the right privileges or members of right groups, or from a management point of view, can my system perform delegation quite effectively? Can it go beyond the native Active Directory limitation or Office 365 limitation and perform delegation at a granular level? That is the $1 million question. So most of the time, users tend to have more privileges than they are required. Probably an help desk technician who requires the provision just to reset password ends up having provision to create users, assign licenses, manage users, and all of that. That is essentially because the granularity that comes with the native tools or the stock options aren't really that effective. So we would need a tool that helps you get to the roots and give you that access to delegate granularly. So that is another interesting case that we'll be walking you through. So just a quick second, got that aspect out. There you go. So we are talking about delegating Office 365. There's a basic logic to delegation and how it works. You start off with help desk roles, where you say a specific role needs access to these tasks. So you specify what actions can a role perform. Alright, and then associate that role to a user. So a user can have multiple roles. A user probably who's an administrator can have a couple of roles. A user from the HR department could probably just have one role. Help desk technicians probably a few actions again. So very simple, straightforward. You start with help desk roles, where you say what actions can be given to a specific role. I try to create a new role right here. I get a dashboard from where I can pick and choose attributes that need to be assigned to a role. So here you go. I'm going to call it help desk role. Alright, see how granular the whole thing is. You can get at an attribute level. This is not available with the default console on Office 365. We are talking about the right usage of privileges and granting the users just enough access and the privilege of the principle of least privilege. So I'm going to quickly create a role for HR users. Okay, the HR users, all that they require is a specific set of management actions. Let's say being able to reset passwords for users or unlock accounts. At best, that is how much that I give them any given day. So I'm going to let them have those provisions, being able to just reset passwords and unblock users, or probably block users. That's all that they get. And when it comes to reporting, I would give them a little extra leverage, get them to see a few reports that could be very helpful in determining what's the performance of a user, how long are they logging in, when have they logged in, when have they logged out, what's their status with respect to their mailbox activity, things like that. Have they been inactive, have they been active, what are the folders that they've been able to access in OneDrive. Certain accesses could be given, certain reports can be given to the HR as well. So you can get really granular and decide who gets what, which user gets what access. All right, I'm going to quickly save this role and show you what happens afterwards. So you start out creating roles. You could create such roles for technicians in your help desk. You could create such roles for auditors who will just need reports and auditing and not any management functionality. You could create that as well. Then get to the technicians module, where you say or where you specify which technician gets what role. Let me check if I have the provision to add. Okay, my license limit has exceeded, so I have certain technicians already here, so I can customize what roles and actions can these technicians have access to. So I'm going to say help desk roles. I'm going to say the role that I just created. Let's see. So HR users, that's the role that these users need to have. And I can also associate them with certain licenses. What can they be able to manage? What can they edit? All of that is available right here. And I can also overwrite existing delegation settings. So if there are any manual delegation settings in your Office 365, I can very much use the tool to override those settings to make it absolutely granular. That is an useful functionality right here. So what all can I do? So these are the functions that I'm able to do when it comes to delegating it granularly. And yes, the tool also lets you keep track on which users performed what tasks. So since you are talking about principle of least privilege and managing them securely, you would want to know the complete set of activities that every technician or user performed with the tool. That is again available for use. So principle of least privilege done right in both ways. While users are being provisioned, the right groups are assigned. While users are moving or jumping between departments, the right entitlements are given. And even when an administrator is performing a task or a technician is performing a task, they would not have more privileges than they actually require. So that is an interesting case for user lifecycle management. Another one is just-in-time access. So this is a very useful functionality when it comes to organizations that have contract laborers or workforce that's on contract. So you would want them to have access only for a specific span of time, and in fact you would want them to be removed from all groups and all accesses after a specific time. You can configure that right here with the automation module that can be timed, that can be automatic. So let's say your condition is set that every user who is a part of the contractors group should have access to resources for, let's say, 60 days. The system understands who are those users, starts counting 60 days, and when it's the 60th day, it automatically steps in to revoke all those accesses. So this is again an interesting use case. The next one is the monotony. What happens? How do administrators struggle getting their users to reset their passwords right on time? In spite of Microsoft having inbuilt provisions to notify users upon impending password resets, do they reset their passwords? The answer is almost no all the time. So they do not understand the seriousness of not resetting password. They could probably be a potential threat to the organization or make the organization more vulnerable to attacks. So what do? We would need an automation that can automatically reset their passwords if they have not done their job. So the automation can step in, check if they have not reset their passwords based on a report that the tool generates, and kickstart a password reset and send out a notification both to the user and the administrator after the reset is done with security questions that they need to take for them to be able to log into the system. So here we are talking about quite a lot of concepts where we would want to ensure that the security is priority. So we're working on a contextual authentication module, an algorithm that would essentially evaluate every single logon activity against a risk score that's built for every user. So when a user is trying to log in, parameters like the geographical location from where they are logging in, the IP address from where they are logging in, the device with which they are using, probably even the time of day, all of that gets taken into consideration and a risk profile gets drawn for a user. So if there is a deviation from usual behavior, the user needs to pass through more challenges. They'll have multiple factors to pass through before they could perform any of these tasks. So the automation module is going to make it quite simple, quite straightforward, and the password reset module is going to ensure that you do not get help desk calls. In fact, I have a really quick math puzzle for you here. Let's say your organization has about 500 users. On an average, a user calls up the administrator at least 20 times in a year, roughly 2 times in a month. So that accounts to about 10,000 calls, and based on the statistics and research that we've done, 30% of these calls are help desk calls for password resets. How much does that amount to? A huge sum of money that goes, not just money, but also time of administrators that gets wasted just resetting passwords. So how cool would it be if you can automate password resets? That was the idea. Likewise, offboarding user is another interesting case. Unlike onboarding user, offboarding is a serious task. If something goes wrong while users are being offboarded, that could give them every chance to get back into your environment from a backdoor access. It could be something as simple as an email forwarding that they have set to an external email ID. That'd be the last thing that you'd expect, wouldn't you? Well, you'd definitely be sure to remove them from critical groups, ensure that you have their licenses revoked. You would even ensure that their accounts are disabled or whatnot. But then, what these users do is a little forward. When they have the privileges, when they have the accesses, they try and set email forwarding to their personal email IDs. They try and exfiltrate data at every juncture possible. So all of that can be checked if you have a 360-degree offboarding policy that's set, that determines what's the status of the user, has it been requested by the HR, goes forward, cleaning up the user at every single level. The attributes get removed, the account gets deleted. If before it gets deleted, it gets disabled, passwords get reset, licenses get revoked, licenses get reassigned. So we're talking about an effective 360-degree offboarding as well. So the same works out for Active Directory too. So when we're talking about both onboarding, offboarding, and managing users, at every juncture, license management becomes inevitably a part of all these processes. So when users are being provisioned, licenses need to be simultaneously given. When users are being deprovisioned, they have to be automatically removed. And the administrator should also be notified on the status of the license usage. Who is using how much license? Who is not using a license at all? Is there a dormant account or an inactive account unnecessarily holding up a couple of licenses? You could do all of that with the tool to ensure that you have your license management done right. So we are almost at the end of the webinar. I've got access to a specific set of free tools that I'd want to share with you. Very helpful set of tools. In fact, this one right here will be super helpful if you're in process of migrating to Office 365. I'm going to give you my email ID. Please write to me if you want access to the tool. The ebook that we've got right here, a couple of ebooks, the ones that I was talking about, Homeland Security, or if you're talking about Office 365, Secure Score and how to get your Secure Score pumped, you could very much write to me at jay@manageengine.com. Straightforward, j@manageengine.com. And I'd love to share all of these resources, the copy of today's webinar, the recording of it, and if you have questions as well, feel free to write to me. So thank you once again. You've been such a wonderful audience. We've been discussing about how to streamline Office 365 user lifecycle management. We saw how simple it is to create automations for onboarding users, how intelligent and intuitive and context-based is onboarding for different departments and bulk users, how easy it is to manage licenses, how easy it is to revoke licenses, and how simple it is when an offboarding automation can help you ensure 100% security and also foolproofs your system at the same time. So we've discussed quite a lot today in a short span of time. Thank you so much. You've been a wonderful audience and you've been so patient. I would definitely love to see questions coming my way. I'm going to write back to you right away after this session. If you want a copy of the video or the deck, please drop me an email or a message right now. Thank you.